My legal team has just filed a blockbuster lawsuit against Facebook and Instagram's Australian fact checkers in the County Court of Victoria. Now watch this video all the way through to understand why this is possibly the first case in which the self-proclaimed gatekeepers of truth will finally be exposed in a court of law. RMIT University, the fact checkers, are taking this case extremely seriously, lawyering up with one of the top law firms in the country. But that doesn't scare me because we have such a strong case and a great legal team of our own. I'm willing to go all the way for this win, but as usual, I can only do this with your help at factchecklawsuit.com. Again, watch this until the end, then share the news, and if you're in a position to help, please support this mammoth fight at factchecklawsuit.com. You possibly remember earlier this year, the CEO of the Shrine of Remembrance, Dean Lee, cancelled his plans to light the sacred site in pride colours, citing threats against his staff for backtracking on his controversial move. So I did what any real investigative journalist should do. I went down to find out what the alleged threats were. And imagine my shock when I captured on camera Victoria Police's Protective Services officer in charge of security at the site at the time, refuting Lee's claim.
Do you know about the threats that they say that they got? No threats to staff?
Oh, just emails and what have you. Yeah, there's no they're actually not threats. They're just hate mail.
Ah, okay.
And our team didn't stop there. We also followed up with the Victoria Police Media Unit, who confirmed in writing police had not received a formal report. You'd think after that the mainstream media would have done its job after we proved that their lead story across the country was a fabrication by Dean Lee to save face for legitimate backlash regarding his plan to desecrate the shrine. But no, crickets. And to make matters worse, 10 days later, Facebook and Instagram slapped the posts with a false information warning and added restrictions to the pages that dared to share it. When you click through to the so-called fact checkers article at RMIT University, they state it's false because staff at the Shrine of Remembrance did receive threats to their safety, which Victoria Police are investigating. The irony is they deemed my report false because apparently we published it without providing any sound evidence. I shared the video of the man in charge of security saying that there were no threats, and I quoted police media that there were no formal reports at the time of publication. So what sound evidence were they relying on? It must have been pretty strong. Well, the word of Dean Lee and his marketing manager. No joke. Oh, and then they approached the same media team who said that there were no reports at the time of publication, but then suddenly a week later telling the fact checkers, trying to discredit me, that the police were actually investigating correspondence received by staff at the Shrine of Remembrance. To be clear, not even police a week later mentioned the alleged threats. And if they were indeed real, why didn't the fact checkers simply publish the threats or even say they cited them? In reality, I actually provided more sound evidence than Facebook and Instagram's Aussie fact checkers at RMIT Fact Lab. But to make matters even worse, they hit independent journalist Rukshan Fernando with a false news label for simply commentating on my report.
I'm just providing commentary on what you reported, Rebel News reported, and they've tagged me for false information. This is the first time I've received a false information tag. And, I'm very careful with what I report on. And, I was there when you were doing this particular story, and I saw you doing investigative journalism and asking questions. So for me to think that looking at something which is investigative journalism and, sharing an opinion about it would be tagged as false information, it's quite, it's not something that you expect to happen.
This is a fact check
Yep.
without any of the facts presented. There's only one of us here that has provided any evidence, and it ain't RMIT.
Yeah. I mean, I'm under no obligation to believe the CEO of a company or the CEO of the Shrine.
Especially when he's the one in question.
Exactly, yeah.
He's the one that we're questioning. So from now on, any time that there's a person in power, as long as he says he's not doing anything wrong,
Yeah.
we've got to take his word on it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, RMIT is going to give you and anyone who dares to commentate
Yeah.
or give their opinion on the situation they're all going to get a fact check.
Well, that's what it feels like, right? Can I question a politician just because they're a figure of authority? Of course we can. We do it all the time. ABC, all these news organizations, they question certain politicians all the time. So for us then questioning the veracity of something that's said by the CEO of the Shrine, that's fair game. And that's a part of being a journalist. That's a part of doing investigative journalism. And for it to be called out as false information and fake, just based on their opinion, without actually providing any of the evidence, without even saying that they've cited the evidence themselves, it's questionable. And it's a very, deceptive type of fact checks here, which, impact people like myself.
After all that, we tried to get RMIT to rectify their fact check through a concerns notice, to which their in-house legal department responded with a laughable 8-page justification that looked like a child wrote it. You can actually read the entire ridiculous response also at factchecklawsuit.com. It'll be embedded into the article associated to this news, and you can also read our lawsuit, the full lawsuit. Go read it all, because now we're suing them.
There's two claims here, Avi. The first is a defamation claim. The other is a claim under the Australian Consumer Law, or the ACL. The defamation claim, pretty obvious what that's all about. The fact check has published something that we say was just not accurate, and in that way it was defamatory. The other claim, the ACL claim, the Consumer Law claim, that protects consumers from companies acting in trade and commerce from making false and misleading claims. And so that's exactly what we say has occurred here. You've got a company or an entity making false and misleading claims. So we say that's in breach of the Australian Consumer Law, and that gives you two separate claims.
Unlike their initial embarrassing response, which they're unsurprisingly trying to distance themselves from, now RMIT is taking this seriously, as they've lawyered up with one of the most expensive law firms in the country. So we have a big, costly fight on our hands, but one that has to be had. And as usual, I need your help to have it. If you agree, please give what you can to the battle ahead at factchecklawsuit.com.
They've hired a pretty big lawyer, haven't they?
Yeah, they've got Minter Ellison, Minter Ellison is one of the biggest firms in the world.
It's not funny to take on Rebel News. They hired one of the biggest law firms in the world.
Yeah, I can tell you, I'm happy to tell you their charge out rates will be a lot more than ours as well.
I'm going to ask you a tough question, and I'm a little afraid of the answer. Taking on a big institution like this, in the two different streams you're talking about, defamation and consumer protection, what are we talking about here?
Hundreds of thousands, unfortunately.
I just think that 99.999% of people who are hit with a false fact check have to suffer the damages in silence. Because what are you going to do? You can't take on Facebook. You can't take on RMIT. I mean, who could possibly afford to do that? I think the only way this works, Justin, is if we ask thousands of ordinary Australians to chip in $50 or $100. And I'm from Canada, as you could probably tell from my accent. I think this is important for people around the world also.
Facebook and Instagram act like they introduced independent fact checkers to counter medical misinformation and election fraud claims. And they often get those wrong from biased partisan position. However, this was neither of those things. And in Australia, we have robust defamation laws that if I really was so wrong, Dean Lee could have sued me. He didn't, which in itself confirms what we reported. We presented the receipts in our stories. They didn't.
Everyone makes mistakes, but perhaps it's so embarrassing for them to admit that the fact checker didn't check their facts.
You know what? There might be something else. And maybe you can speak to this because you're a media lawyer in Australia. You would know a lot of cases like this. Has anyone in Australia ever before challenged an official fact checker in court like this that you know of?
I'm not aware of any.
So this could be precedent setting. It might be the first time they've ever been challenged, and maybe they don't take it very well.
Possibly.
Maybe they're used to being high on Mount Olympus, and how dare grassroots citizen journalists even challenge them?
Possibly. And it's possible that they don't think that you guys will actually sue. And when you do, it might be then at that stage, they will be sensible and reasonable about this and actually come to it with an open mind that maybe they did make a mistake.
If you're excited by the news of finally holding the fact checkers accountable, please share this story far and wide. And then, if you're willing and you're able, please give what you can at factchecklawsuit.com. Like all my legal battles, I cannot pursue them without your generosity. And I reckon this one is worth every penny. Factchecklawsuit.com. Please donate now.